another live recording here. This time, where are we, Rob?
The UEFA Hotel had the Champions League final in central London.
Zeke, you know this sort of thing very well. Everyone in one place. Not sure everyone kind of friendly with each other, but you have to give that handshake for peace. It's that moment for the Champions League final, so everyone pretends to be getting along well.
Yeah, I know that there's that sort of hotel lobby. Everyone's hanging around waiting for the big event. Is there any news coming out from there, guys?
Ooh, we've got a bit to get into on this episode of Sport Unlocked. Hello, welcome again everyone to Sport Unlocked. Joining me, Rob Harris as ever from Sky News, Martyn Ziegler from The Times, and alongside me here, Tariq Panja from The New York Times. And we are being made to feel not unwelcome here by UEFA. Sometimes it's not always like that. And you had your experience in Bangkok recently at FIFA.
Yeah, well, Zeke, you'd know this, and for the listeners, this sort of event is really useful from a work point of view because you have the leagues here, you have representing the clubs, UEFA, all sorts of people all in one place. And you get a chance to have a chat with people, usually just kind of trying to get, I guess, not really a story, but more context to what's happening in the world of football. So they can be quite useful.
Just getting to, this is how you get to know people. This is how good journalism works.
A blast from the past. Former La Liga spokesman Joris Evers, friend of the pod, appeared here. We hadn't seen him for about, a year? Now he's moved to Heineken. And he can't get away from football, Martyn, because Heineken is a big sponsor of the Champions League. So he's being haunted by some of his old friends and foes alike.
Javier Tebas on the next table as well, talking to him. We have had no Heinekens to make clear. This is not a sponsored addition to the pod.
Yeah, not a sponsored event. Martyn, there's a room here which makes for interesting viewing, and Joris made that point from as a people watcher or someone who wants to kind of have their ear out. You have a setup of very different tables all over the place, like in a lounge. And on one corner, you see a few club executives, and the other, a few TV guys. And sometimes they're not the most discreet, but perhaps they should be. So not the worst place to be on a Friday afternoon.
We had hoped to be somewhere else next week. In fact, we had been asked to be able to come to an event being held at the Emirates Stadium, quite an intriguing event to help discover more about a lot of the subjects we report on. It was called the Middle East Sports Investment Forum. Then suddenly what happened? Both of us got this message.
Yeah, we both got the message, and just a bit more in the event, and very timely. You had government officials from Saudi Arabia, which is, I guess, one of the most prominent destinations when it comes to sports, and certainly sports money, so that would have been useful. And also Qatari officials hosted the last World Cup, of course, and it was going to be at the Emirates Stadium, and we were told, yeah, you can attend as media, and suddenly we get this message. I hope this message finds you well, but some of our speakers and government officials have recently informed us that they're unhappy to have any sort of media in attendance at MESIF 2024. It is with great disappointment that we must withdraw your media pass on this basis. Now, I think some of those government officials aren't that disappointed we're not going to be there.
Bit of a disappointment because it is sponsored by the Saudi government, and they are trying to open up and explain more. So more of a missed opportunity really to understand things.
So you got an email inviting you to attend?
Well, we had messaged them first, but then they did respond very positively.
Okay, that's fine. And they responded positively, and then they said, sorry guys, you can't come anyway because you might report on something. What might be said that they don't want coming out?
Nothing that would be controversial. I mean, it's one of those events where you have the panels, and it would have been a chance for, I guess, Saudi officials to, further get their message across. They've been perhaps the busiest country in sport over the last 24 months, and this might have been an opportunity. But Rob, in terms of Saudi, a little bit more flesh on the bone on the 2034 World Cup?
Yeah, interestingly, hearing a bit of detail from the FIFA Council meeting that was held last year that led to the fast-track process to award Saudi Arabia as eventually the sole bidder for 2034. If we remember back to that meeting when they decided to put the 6 countries together for 2030 from 3 continents, including Spain and Portugal and Morocco as the lead participants, at the same meeting, they decided to give a few weeks for any entrance into the 2034 process. We suddenly then had Saudi Arabia announcing, looking like they knew something in advance. Anyway, what we, of course, eventually discovered was Saudi Arabia would be the sole bidder. In that FIFA Council meeting, apparently Gianni Infantino was asked by one of his members why they're doing this so quickly, something we've reported on. And apparently, so we're told, Infantino looks a bit perplexed and eventually just said, for stability.
Which is strange because it caused a bit of instability given that bid has only had 3 weeks to decide if they were going for this World Cup. So it was a strange moment. And don't forget, 2034 is a very long time away, Martyn.
Yeah, but it certainly provides financial stability, doesn't it? Because not only is it guaranteed a lot of money for FIFA from going to Saudi Arabia, then obviously you've got the Aramco sponsorship deal already. And we went to Bangkok hoping that we could ask Gianni Infantino some searching questions on this. I think he probably anticipated that there was going to be some searching questions in Saudi Arabia, which is why I decided not to speak to us.
Interestingly, on that, so we would hope to be able to ask Gianni Infantino about that meeting. So we mentioned it not being able to actually get an answer from him as we raise that information. Some people around here who are very avid pod listeners mentioning our discussion about lack of press conferences and about how they see the value of it, and still the fallout of FIFA from not having a press conference. And something I said to someone there recently, which was like, you could easily have done it because it's hardly an unpredictable question to be asked about Saudi Arabia. You could plan it for months in advance.
You could, but it's a funny place to be discussing this because we're at the UEFA hotel. And let's be honest, it's another organisation that isn't that keen on press conferences with its leadership either. So it seems to be more of a pattern in football more generally. We rarely get press conferences at all.
Although we have had a few times in recent months with Theodoridis doing as UEFA General Secretary, in fact, some news lines coming out of that. Someone who perhaps for a time we didn't hear that much from, we certainly featured him the other week when we asked him about it, was Premiership Executive Richard Masters, who has a lot more visibility at the moment. We actually saw him at a FIFPRO organised event here in London during the week. It was about player workload, and even just his presence was pretty notable on a panel alongside Javier Tebas, the La Liga president, as well as Martyn Malanga, the Professional Footballers Association chief executive, really making his sort of presence felt. The fact turning up at this sort of evening panel event, not a huge event, to appear united really in their opposition to the Club World Cup and FIFA's plans.
Yeah, we talked about this last week, perhaps the week before, and this seems to be the story, sort of governance story in FIFA land and beyond. This international match calendar and who gets to decide when games are being played. We mentioned that letter from the World Leagues Forum that threatened legal action. This time we have them in front of us. And don't forget, Tebas and Masters next to each other is an interesting sight because Tebas is not been afraid to throw barbs the Premier League's way in the past. So the fact they were there together. Richard Masters specifically said, the leagues, they've reached a point where they've lost faith in Infantino and FIFA in terms of being fair, in terms of having a dialogue. So they've been locked out of major decisions and they're contemplating this legal action. We think enough is enough. It's a shame we've got here. It's quite strong stuff.
He used the word frustrated and angry and talked about 20 letters that had been sent. He said without response, although we've seen one of the letters that Matthias Graston, the General Secretary, did write back, inviting them to talks.
Yeah, there was some also interesting stuff from Martyn Malanga, wasn't there? The PFA chief executive. I mean, I think this issue of legal action from the leagues, I think, is probably going to happen in some form, maybe by individual leagues rather than the actual World Leagues Association. Or the European leagues, perhaps. But Malanga, he was saying, players he'd talked to were saying, it's too much. Don't blame us if we go on strike. What else can we do? But I mean, this has made some sort of fairly big headlines. But realistically, are people going to strike? Are the clubs involved in this? Real Madrid, Chelsea, Manchester City. Are they going to pull out of this Club World Cup, which is going to bring them tens of millions of pounds next year? I mean, let's look at this realistically.
Yeah, we're talking about just some in Western Europe because, as I've mentioned before, I still can't imagine some of those clubs who are participating will want to miss out on the chance. Really, will the Seattle Sounders not want to play in the Club World Cup? Esperance de Tunis, Auckland City, big platforms for them by participating in this. And this threat has been around, but Mahet from the PFA probably reflecting a Premier League point of view, where, raised the fact that some people will say, well, players earn a lot of money. Why do they want to strike? And he said, players have said to him, we don't even have time to spend the money.
Well, I'd like to see them say that in the next round of contract negotiations when they ask for a pay cut. The other point here is the Club World Cup. You mentioned those teams, Rob, but I think the big European teams do want to play in these competitions because we talked about the leagues, we talked about the union. We haven't had anything from the European Clubs Association at all on this. I think there is a sense that they want to play in this competition because it's another chance for some of those teams to make money.
And there was a comment this week from Nasser Al-Khelaifi, the European Club Association chief, PSG, and beIN Sports chief as well. He was speaking at the Globe conference, and he says the Club World Cup could be bigger than the World Cup. And all the evidence, certainly from conversations we're having around here, was quite a UEFA-centric point of view, is the fact they have no deals in place for this FIFA, for this Club World Cup, with a year to go, no stadiums, no sponsors announced at all.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's going to be anything like that. It's not going to be as big as the Champions League because, the number of sort of big clubs in it are limited, aren't they? But so that's from my viewpoint. But I was also wondering, FIFA they don't have the Confederations Cup anymore, so this is effectively being played in that slot. So is there an argument that actually they aren't increasing it too much and? The bigger pressure has been coming from the expanded Champions League, perhaps. I don't know. And the other thing, the Olympic tournament. Look at, is it Julian Alvarez? He's going to play in Copa America, I think, Manchester City forward. Then he's going to go to the Olympic football tournament, and then he's going to start the Premier League season again. It's just like that really is unsustainable. You can't do all of that, surely.
Another player, you might think Kylian Mbappe as well. Could be one of the poster childs of the Paris Olympics. We'll also play at the Euros for France, where we expect them, given the quality, probably go deep. And then he's got probably this new big season for him at the new club, most probably Real Madrid. That is quite a lot of football. He's talked about the workload in the past, saying, of course, we'll keep playing, but then it's going to affect quality. I think Kylian Mbappe has said in the past.
And one of the examples posted on stage at the FIFPRO event, various bits of data they showed, was on Jude Bellingham, another Real Madrid player. Well, Mbappe's not signed it for Real Madrid. We're expecting that to happen. And they're saying that he's already accumulated almost 20,000 on-pitch minutes, even though he doesn't turn 21 until June, saying that around 10% of that came in senior national team appearances and the rest was in competitive club matches for Birmingham, then Dortmund, then Real Madrid. And it's talking about the workload just for a young player like Bellingham, who could have a long career. I said to him when I interviewed him a few weeks ago, we could be at the 2038 World Cup even if he is able to maintain career longevity. The workload's so high.
He could, and also the mental strain. That's something that hasn't been discussed a lot. But Darren Burgess, performance expert who's worked at Liverpool and Arsenal and is now in Australia, he said, like, the mental health, because of that pressure, the toll of playing top-level football so often, it's something that isn't discussed, and it's something that we might want to consider when we think about this. But the strike, the issue of the strike, what games are we talking about? Because now they're saying if they're going to go on strike, they're going to miss its national team games. Well, why national team games and not club games? When we're talking about strikes, what does that one make you more tired than the other one? It's about the travel maybe. But people are going to choose what's in their interest. Football is a game of self-interest more and more, it seems like.
The problematic thing with the strike is if they were going to strike against the Club World Cup, that would mean striking in FIFA matches. Unless you're going to boycott the Club World Cup as players, would that mean then skipping international qualifiers? But then you don't want to miss out chance of qualifying for the World Cup in 2026 in North America. It's interesting, I interviewed Gareth Bale that ran on Sky this week, and he was very vocal actually on workload, reflecting on his own career and this balance between business and how much money you need to raise as clubs and entities and how much a body can actually go through with the mental and physical sort of challenge that presents. And I actually said to him, what are your thoughts for the future of football, the overall state of things? And he talks about not wanting greed to take over.
Yeah, well, good luck with that in football. I think that's what it's been based on for generations, probably. But no, it's an interesting topic, and I think it's very likely we're going to end up in court somehow.
Well, we'll keep an eye on that. Some fascinating data there from FIFPRO logging the load on the games. In fact, we actually heard also this week from Amanda Staveley, there, one of the Newcastle part owners, acknowledging supporters' concerns that the fact Newcastle went to play a post-season friendly all the way in Melbourne, Australia against Tottenham. And even fans are concerned about that and the sort of pressure that's put on the players as well as they complete the season. Well, everything building up as we recall to Champions League final, UEFA meetings, and seeing which the great, the good come here.
This will be quite a funny one. Real Madrid, if they win the tournament, basically their backers have been involved in this court case against UEFA this week in Madrid.
Of course, nearly forgot to want to mention our favourite subjects, the Super League, and this verdict that came through from Madrid. What did it mean? Does it matter?
I don't think it makes a huge amount of difference, certainly not initially. I think probably in the long run is going to mean clubs will get more power, more influence. I mean, this court case, it didn't look at the new UEFA authorisation rules that were brought in June 2022. So it's a bit sort of outdated, but I think that the way it seems to be heading, the European Court of Justice ruling, this Madrid Commercial Court ruling, I think is going to be eventually there'll be clubs being able to sort of exert their muscles a bit more.
All right, why is this? What did it exactly say? It talks about the abusive power of UEFA. UEFA says it's about old rules. What is the situation?
Yeah.
Both sides claiming victory, or someone said both sides beaten.
Yeah, I'd say it's more that. I think it's like two boxers and have knocked each other out at this point. But Martyn's right. It's a case that this was the old Super League construct, that 12-team thing that lasted about 2 days and collapsed. It feels a bit in the past. And Martyn, you mentioned the fact that they talk about authorization rules. This is that any new competition would require authorization from a UEFA or FIFA to go ahead. And you said UEFA has changed those rules. I would say those rules have yet to be tested. No, that court did not say that UEFA's modified rules are great, let's get going. It's just no one has tested it. What I think will be interesting is if somebody tries to host a pan-European competition, meeting the requirements of it being an open competition and access being open from across Europe, can UEFA say no? I don't think they can. And I would agree with you to say that the clubs have a lot more power. But who knows? We may never get to see any of this. The idea that this company, A22, is still pushing something, we don't know if anything concrete will ever develop from this.
No, and I think a lot of the reason for that is that the English clubs, because of Brexit and because of rules that have been brought in by the Premier League and the FA and this incoming football regulator, they can't join an unauthorised competition, a breakaway competition. So I don't think they will be part of any sort of challenge. I don't think they can be. So it would have to be done without them. And is that actually going to work? I don't know.
Yeah, as we say, it all seems to be about the clubs gaining more power, more status, particularly as they launch this joint venture with UEFA to sell more rights to competitions. And it brings me back to what we were hearing from at this FIFPRO event, Richard Masters, talking about why they're not consulted by FIFA. To me, it seems about the leagues wanting a place even on the FIFA Council, be in the room for those big meetings to elevate their status, a bit like the European leagues and the European Club Association are on the UEFA Executive Committee.
Yeah, I think, more than that. The clubs, the leagues, the players' unions, they all say that they are major stakeholders in football, and they're right. They are kind of employers of thousands of players around the world in some cases. They host some of the most popular leagues, but they're kind of told what to do by FIFA and UEFA and these federations. So they've got skin in the game, and they feel like in the modern world that should give them some right to have a say over how things have developed. But I noticed Richard Masters, after he said that, got some stick online saying it's a bit rich for them saying we've been closed out. Where Martyn, sometimes domestically, some of the lower division teams in England think they've been closed out by the Premier League.
Well, financially, they would perhaps say that. The Premier League hasn't expanded its competitions, as it hasn't sort of. They're not playing more matches than they have been. So, you could actually say that the way they're pushing is for there to be fewer domestic matches. There's no FA Cup replays next season. So, yeah.
Yeah, and while FIFA, for instance, might point to things like the Premier League Summer Series, it's very much a friendly series, unlike, say, the Club World Cup, which will have a financial incentive to do well. It's expected to be a top-level competition for players. Now, Premier League next week have quite a big meeting coming up. It's their annual general meeting. One of the things up for discussion is VAR, a vote, which doesn't look like it'll go through, scrapping that. Interesting if my Gareth Bale interview saying, get rid of it, it removes the joy of scoring. But what's coming in? Automated or semi-automated offside. So if you don't like the minute analysis of offsides at the moment, it's going to become even more precise, but it will be quicker, won't it?
Yeah, it's an interesting new deal that the Premier League have done with a company called Second Spectrum, which is an American software firm owned by Genius Sports. So look, with the sort of limb tracking we've talked about before, which follows something like 36 points on the body. This has something like it follows points on the body with something like data sent like 200 times a second. I mean, it's just ridiculous. We're talking space age, NASA type Terminator stuff, which is it's meant to be incredibly quick and incredibly accurate most of the time. Although the reason they're not bringing it in from the start of the season is that there have been occasional black spots, so where they haven't been able to actually pick up this for various reasons. I don't know if there's been a lot of bodies or something, which is why they've been testing it to oblivion, and they're going to probably bring it in September, October, or November rather than from the start of the season.
Martyn, you know what's going to happen that first week when they bring it in. Oops, there's that black spot. But what else? What else, Martyn?
They might forget to turn it on like they did with the goal line technology.
There you go.
Interestingly, actually, ultimately led to Aston Villa qualifying for the Champions League this season, because that season when goal line technology didn't work in one match after the pandemic restart in 2020 led to them securing a point which kept them in the Premier League, avoiding being relegated, staying in the Premier League, and ultimately fourth place finish this year.
There you go, Martyn.
Unintended consequences.
When a butterfly flaps its wings somewhere in the Amazon, Aston Villa qualify for the Champions League at the end of that journey. But Martyn, what else is happening at this Premier League meeting? There's some financial issues under discussion too.
Yeah, so there's a whole load of financial stuff. Adopting the sort of squad cost rule, which UEFA have formally, but other things are like Aston Villa are suggesting that the profit and sustainability limit be raised from 105 to 135 million. And Crystal Palace have come up with a sort of counter proposal, which is interesting, which was saying the amount of money that the English clubs get in coefficient funding. So whatever the top club gets, Manchester City, say they get 30 million euros as part of their coefficient payment. The gap between that and Aston Villa should be allowed to be sort of written off as allowable losses, because they think basically Palace think it's unfair that you should get a bonus because of the coefficient funding place. And actually, when it comes to PSR calculations, that shouldn't be taken into account. So I think it's a sort of quite complicated but quite imaginative proposal, which I think might get some support.
But what does that mean in terms of the losses then, Martyn? So you're saying at the moment it's 105 million over 3 years. If Palace's recommendation comes in, how big could that loss, the allowable loss, be, Martyn?
I mean, it depends who you are. So, like, if you're Aston Villa, then it might be you're allowed. Say you have a differential in terms of your coefficient payment from Manchester City of £20 million. Then you will be allowed to lose another £20 million. But if you're Liverpool and your coefficient losses are like coefficient payment is 3 million less.
Yeah, but if we remember why PSR was brought in.
Yeah, if you're Liverpool and your coefficient payment is only a couple of million less than Manchester City's, then you'll only be allowed to lose an extra couple of million. So it's basically what the difference is on the coefficient payment is how much more you're allowed to lose. It's basically a way of letting Aston Villa lose a bit more money from being without actually officially raising the PSR limit for all the clubs.
Nice of Crystal Palace doing that then for Aston Villa moving forward. I think also, Martin, do you think it will become clearer for the fans how this all works? Because one of the things this year has been these point penalties given to Everton and Nottingham Forest and varying points. Is it 4? Is it 6? Is it 10? What's the loss? Do you think they're going to make things clearer as well?
Not immediately. I think there'll be one more year of pain, and I think there were going to be more charges. Potentially Leicester City, I think we're going to get some sort of sanctions. I think there's a chance other clubs will as well. I mean, I think Everton are close to the limit, Aston Villa a bit close to the limit. So let's have a look and see. I mean, I think we're already seeing players being effectively put up for sale by clubs who need to sell in order that they don't sort of breach the rules.
Something we'll be following with that Premier League meeting, but we are here ahead of the Champions League final, of course, Real Madrid against Borussia Dortmund, and something pretty interesting about timing of Borussia Dortmund to announce a new sponsor, which has led to a post from the famous podcaster and someone who played a bit of football once, Gary Lineker, saying, "First time I'll be cheering for Real Madrid in a Champions League final. The reason why? Borussia Dortmund have signed a new sponsorship deal with a weapons manufacturer, Prime Metal. They're going to be on products starting ahead of the final."
Quite amazing, isn't it? It's basically a bomb maker is going to be on the shirt. And at this time where the world is in kind of this febrile environment with what's happening in the Middle East, the war in Ukraine and everything else, I guess business is good for Rhine Metal. But really, is this what should be on the front of a football shirt?
Well, it puts the whole gambling controversy and having betting companies in the shade, doesn't it? Forget about what a cryptocurrency casino.com. We've got, buyyourbombshere.com.
But weapons manufacturers and those involved in warfare actually have some of their technology right the way throughout football, and the origins of some of the replay technology, ball tracking, some of the data that you get on speed partly originates from military technology. So it's probably more just the brand itself being promoted.
Yeah, but I think this particular company does make weapons and bombs rather than VAR and things like that. One of the reasons we talked to someone here who's from a German football team that isn't Dortmund, and he was telling us, I was wondering what the rationale would be. He said this company it's quite worrying in a way. Demand for their products is so great right now. They're on a recruitment drive. So they're looking to hire a lot more people, and that's one of the reasons to get their brand out there. I'm not sure. I don't know how. It's a bit queasy, isn't it, to think that there's a weapons company out there that is doing so well that it's going to put itself on the front of a football shirt as a recruitment tool.
Obviously, we're used to the militarized nature of sport at times, whether that's, members of the British military we'll see involved in things like FA Cup finals even at times, the sort of celebration of the military. Then we sort of almost want to overlook what they do beyond that ceremonial. They are fighting in wars.
Yeah, I mean, would British Aerospace, I suppose that's the same, that would be a similar thing. Would there be a massive uproar if British Aerospace sponsored a Premier League club? Probably.
I think there might be.
Yeah.
And what about BAE Systems? The BAE Systems sponsored FA Cup. I think that might be a problem. And the trophy comes out on some sort of drone. Where does this end?
Yeah, indeed. Well, maybe having a company like Red Bull is less controversial, or maybe not. They're going to be on Leeds United shirts. They just missed out on promotion to the Premier League in losing the playoff final at Wembley in the world's richest game. Maybe some thinking that, is this the start of them getting a rebrand? It's not typical that Red Bull put their names to a club and they don't end up with some variation of RB next to them. So, RB Leeds, anyone?
Zeke, you live up there. It would be an absolute riot if Leeds United was to change its name, right?
Would you predict a riot?
Would you predict a riot, Zeke?
I would predict a riot. That's not going to happen.
That is their answer, of course, to Kaiser Chiefs for those
For sure.
familiar.
Yeah, that is not going to happen for sure. In fact, I don't think it can happen. I think there are Football Association rules now brought in actually fairly recently. As when the regulator plans were first announced, the sort of FA took those steps that they can't actually do that without FA permission. So, yes, you can have Red Bull Ellen Road or Relland Road or something like that, but you can't change the name of the club in English football.
Yeah, I don't think that would go down too well with Leeds at all. Can we say he's a Leeds United fan? Theodoridis, the UEFA General Secretary of all people, he actually got to hand over the Europa Conference League trophy in Athens this week. Defeat for Fiorentina, but victory for his long-standing club, Olympiacos.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite emotional moment for Theodoridis. His father was on the board of Olympiacos, and his family was in the stadium, and the game was in Athens as well. And he got the nod from the UEFA president, Alexander Shefrin, to give the trophy to Olympiacos. And I tell you, I wasn't a big fan initially of this idea of this Conference League, more football, more competitions. But it does mean, and it's worked. It means a lot to the teams that perform in it to get to the final. Olympiacos, the first team from Greece to win a UEFA club competition, and the scenes in Piraeus, the suburb of Athens where they're from, are worth looking on YouTube or wherever else you get your videos from, because they were quite special, and that competition has worked.
Yeah, amazing scenes. West Ham United, of course, similar. It was a huge day for them when they won it. And I agree. I have to say I was particularly hopeful it was going to be a good tournament. I thought it was going to be a sort of bit of an afterthought, but actually it's one of the more successful things that has happened, particularly for clubs who just wouldn't get a chance winning the Europa League or the Champions League.
Do you have a new competition name for that at some point? They did say in the last sort of year they're going to rebrand it. It's a very long name.
Well, the Europa Conference League. Yeah. We await that. I suppose it creates work for people who... Football always creates new jobs, doesn't it? So there's a branding expert out there who's now renamed the Europa Conference League.
So the place to know is I'm actually just looking at the sign. It says with a big arrow, UEFA Club Competitions Committee meeting. Perhaps we should have just gone in there to find out.
They'll know.
And it all passed off pretty safely, the final, no major concerns, because it had been a dangerous, chaotic weekend in Greece. The Greek Cup final was played behind closed doors because of concerns about disorder, but it still had issues because Stephanie Frappard, who was the first female referee of a Greek Cup final, she had to be shielded by police to taken off the pitch. This was after officials and players from Aris confronted Frappard after Panathinaikos won 1-0 in that game.
And Frappard, don't forget, is not Greek, she's French. So that's how much tension there's been in Greece about refereeing. So even when they've got this external refereeing, we still have this chaos. Greece and, of course, Turkey have been the stories this year when it comes to attacks, if you want, on officials and safety issues. At least the Conference League final went off okay.
Security and safety, obviously, always such a key concern of sports organisers, and a few various issues for us to talk through now. One is the build-up to the Olympics in France, and there has been huge fears there about the terror threat. It has been raised to the highest level in recent months. And now, French authorities have announced an 18-year-old Chechen national was arrested because apparently he wanted to, quote, die and become a martyr with a potential attack on the stadium in Saint Etienne that was going to hold Olympic football matches during the Olympics. This is news that they said they have foiled their first attack against the Olympic and Paralympic Games, but they say it's the 50th attack foiled by the intelligence services since 2017. It's really forcing the challenge for the Olympics that's going to have the opening ceremony right the way down the River Seine with the athletes on a flotilla of boats.
No, yeah, it's really worrying. I know there's a report by the security intelligence company last summer, Dragonfly, said that the terrorism threat of Paris was severe. And basically suggested that it was more likely than not that there would be some sort of security event there. So all you can say is that you can be sure that there will be an enormous amount of security in Paris with huge numbers of officers. It may be that this might be one of the safest places to be in the world.
And this is a reminder, of course, Olympics is staged far beyond the capital, particularly football, which will be across France. Most tickets, I think, sold for Olympic football, given the size of the venues being used. And security challenges also concerning the T20 Men's Cricket World Cup. partly taking place in the United States, and authorities there talking about the need to increase security after reports of threats, particularly to the India-Pakistan match and the pro-ISIS propaganda they're talking about, which is being cited apparently in a security bulletin.
Yeah, but this reminds us of a few weeks ago where we had the chaos around one Champions League match round. Had Rob going from London to Paris, etc., after some messages online, etc., where a group called ISIS-K had threatened Champions League games. I mean, it's very hard to know how serious the threats are. However, we know that these events are targeted. We also know that the people who run them are cognizant of this, and they're some of the most heavily secured events in the world. And the other point, I suppose, is all of this is taking place against the backdrop of what's happening in the Middle East as well, and it's kind of a lot of inflammatory rhetoric flying around. It's a very difficult time for the world, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's the point. I mean, it's the Russia, Ukraine. There's the events in the Gaza, really big sort of geopolitical things which perhaps haven't happened. Those sorts of things weren't happening at the London Olympics, and I think Seb Coe referred to that this week. He was the London 2012 chairman, and he said actually, they thought it was more likely the London Olympics was going to be disrupted by Fathers for Justice than by a sort of terrorist attack.
Yeah, that India-Pakistan match taking place in Nassau County in New York. And of course, long-standing tensions between India and Pakistan, which you often see manifest themselves in cricket. They didn't play each other for many years, apart from if they were drawn together at tournaments, did they?
They don't. They still don't play each other. No home and away games for over a decade now, and no sign of those happening anytime soon. But on a positive note, this is one of the biggest rivalries in sport. The tickets are proving really hard to get. I'm hearing reports of got a single match ticket at 20,000 euros. You hope in cricket it's probably going to be rained off, Martyn.
Whereabouts is it taking place?
In New York.
And with games in the West Indies and the United States as well with this tournament. Starts as we prepare to record.
First cricket tournament to be staged in North America. Obviously sharing that with the Caribbean.
Not the last, of course, because they're going to have the Olympic crickets in Los Angeles in 2028.
A different type of challenge in terms of protecting an event. French Open, the banned alcohol in the stands. It follows complaints by players, including the Belgian player, David Goffin, who said one person spat gum at him. So this is France banning alcohol from the stands. We've had the previous football tournaments banning France. So it's not just Middle East countries that don't have alcohol. European nations have to put restrictions in because of the fears of rowdy behaviour.
But perhaps they should ban chewing gum. Seems that's what the problem was in this incident.
Well, exactly. Like in Singapore. Yeah. I think it's banned in Singapore, isn't it? So yeah, ban it in French Open. Do you think there'll be sort of people at Wimbledon will be sort of getting drunk and abusing players?
Pim's the drink of choice at Wimbledon, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. This alcohol ban is an interest. Do you think that's just in the Premier League, for example, here in England? You can't drink in the seat, and that's something when you've got more and more fans coming over from North America, for example, they get really surprised that you can't get a beer at a Premier League ground. You can drink on the concourse, but not on the seat. That's been the case for a while, hasn't it, Martyn?
Yeah, that was brought in a long time ago, several decades ago. And I don't think there's any chance of that being lifted. There has Tracy Crouch, the former sports minister, did propose as part of her football review that they should look at being allowed the lower league, League One, League Two, that fans could drink in their seats. But the police said absolutely not. And that, I think, will remain at all levels of professional.
Just we've got all this uncertainty here. And just to bring us to a close, if you think about uncertainty, think about poor old Mark Brees, the new Cameroon manager. On Monday and Tuesday, he had a row with Samuel Eto'o, the FA president. Stand-up row that was online. He was abused, and that video went viral. A couple of days later, Samuel Eto'o then apologised, and Mark Brees is now, guess what, the Cameroon manager again. To talk about uncertainty with leagues and clubs and all this, this poor fellow doesn't know if he's managing from the start of the week to the end of the week.
It's reverse. Xavi Hernandez was leaving Barcelona, then staying again, then leaving again. In England, Kieran McKenna, the Ipswich manager who just got promoted, very curiously being touted with a lot of the big jobs. Even one claim that he turned down Chelsea. Would anyone turn down Chelsea, really? And managed to get a nice new contract at Ipswich. Curious how things get out in the open in such a way.
Well, it's in the media, just watching this as a reader and a viewer, and someone who is aware of how our business works a bit. Kieran McKenna must have a great public relations company behind him. It's fantastic. He was linked to every single big job available. Only the Bayern Munich job seemed to be out of his grasp. That went to Vincent Kompany. And he didn't get any of them. He's staying at Ipswich on a massive new contract. Great job from whoever's managed to do that work for him.
Maybe. I mean, I think when he was seen as a bit of a risk? I don't know, because the Leicester City manager who won them promotion, he's going to Chelsea. So maybe Kieran McKenna wasn't such a crazy idea, was he?
Yeah. Enzo Maresca, one of the disciples of Pep Guardiola. Well, that about brings an end to this week's episode of Sport Unlocked, recorded ahead of the Champions League final at Wembley Stadium. As ever, you can message us at Sport Unlocked on X, Facebook and Instagram. Always welcome your thoughts and feedback. Remember, hit subscribe so we land it in your feeds automatically. Now, thank you for listening. Goodbye.
Cheers, guys.